really in my mind, those types of situations are really going to be dependent on the utilities security program. They obviously pick some of the solutions, maybe not the people that are implementing it. You know, sometimes you get legacy things, but you know, the security program is should be handling those types of situations and taking those things into consideration. On number one, that the possibility is going to be there that can happen, because that's how Guardians makes our living, is propagating our through these types of vulnerabilities. But also, you know, it's I've lost my train of thought. So, excuse me. But yes, you have to take that into consideration in the security program and when you're bringing these solutions together.
I think to amplify on Don's point, there's a difference between a systemic security problem and a deployment security problem. What we do as a manufacturer is we test all the way from the chip level, literally, all the way out to a fully built system. And we look for vulnerabilities in the interactions between those components, so that when we put a system out in the world, we can say, we have checked everything in our system. But we can't tell you how to run it. And we can't tell you which MDMS to put on the back end, or you know, how do you manage your Oracle. Yes, there are going to be vulnerabilities that are going to crop up between different vendors, implementations, and how those systems are plugged together, and they have to be handled on a per deployment basis, because each deployment is going to be unique. So not trying to shift responsibility here, because as we find out about these things, as vendors, we all need to deal with them. But the reporting of those things and the management of the vulnerability, because it's unique to a deployment, has to fall to the utility and the utility's security management and risk management program.
And bringing the vendors together and the documentation together to solve the overall problem.
Throw us in a room with baseball bats, see who's left standing.
So how do you rate your company? I mean, you talk about your product offerings, you got meters, you got open, you got IEEE. On a scale of 1 to 5, how far is it down this methodology?
I'd say we're about in the 3 right now.
On all 3 product offerings?
Yeah, I mean the big ones: OpenWay, IEE, and which one was the other one? I'm sorry, you mentioned the third one. The Choice Connect?
Meters in general.
Meters? I would say we're probably we're aiming around the 3 mark. We're not there yet. It's been a very difficult road. It's a very difficult road to hoe, because of the fact that there's a lot of culture, there's a lot of embedded culture that has to be undone and has to be relearned. Okay, but we are marching down that path.
So when's your time frame for getting there?
My hope is to have actually 2 products going through the process, fully through the process, the 2 major products, or 2 major products, fully through the process by the middle of this year.
What 2 products?
There will be our Choice Connect, which is our meter for the municipals, okay, and IEE. IEE is actually easier because it's a software product. I don't have to deal with too much hardware. OpenWay would probably be by the end of this year is my aim.
So will that change your API on IEEE? If you say you're going to be there by the middle of this year, will that change your
No, I don't believe it will. It depends. It depends on how much. It depends on how far, on how bad we find it. We've really just started into IEE, and it all depends on how much badness I find.
You going to take customer input on that?
In
your evaluation?
I would be willing to take it.
I'll be willing to give it.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know. That opens up a whole can of worms. Okay. No, I mean, look. I mean, you guys are the end users of this system. You guys are the ones who use it. I see it from a development perspective. I see it from a testing perspective. In the real world, you know, doesn't always. You know, people find creative ways of doing things. I mean, you can. You know, normally a car drives on 4 wheels, all 4 touching the ground at the same time, and yet you have people who can figure out how to get them to drive on 2 wheels. You know, I mean. You know, you can make these things do interesting things that usually the designers don't expect.
I'm with Derby, actually goes farther on 3 wheels than it does, faster
Yes, yes, my son figured that out in Scouts as well. One of the last topics that, one of the other topics that Mike Amati wanted me to talk about was multi-generational equipment issues. You know, meters in the past have always been these 20-year, 25-year devices. They sit on your house, they read your electricity, they give you a reading. And now we're asking customers, you know, by the way, technology is changing and you want to have all these new little features into it. And the vendors, for better or worse, seem to be adopting, in some cases, the IT life cycle of 3 to 5 years, do a hardware refresh, which is not realistic in this industry. So the question is, how do we get that kind of concept in sync with meters? And I'm not really even sure how we're going to be able to solve this problem, okay? Because customers, as we've noticed, if you notice with cell phones, everybody's buying every 2 years. Well, okay, maybe not every 2 years, because I'm not one of those people, but people buy very quickly because it's got the new feature, it's got a new operating system, it's got, you know, it's got Bluetooth, it's got this, it's got that, and they want those new features. And the utilities are, from the interaction, the discussions I've had with them, they also want those new features. In some respects, they want those new features because they want to be able to monetize on those features. Okay, it's a new revenue stream for them, a new potential revenue stream. So, you know, one of the things that we're aiming for, and that we think that, you know, and I remember that somebody mentioned about a reference meter design, but one of the things we are aiming for is, you know, you got to realize that if you're doing a kind of device that can be upgradable, that can be changed over time, that can have additional features added in relatively easily, it's got to make sure that you've got a plan for security from the outset. Okay, if I can just drop a board into this thing somehow to add feature functionality, all right, well, that new board represents a whole new threat, you know, attack surface. I need to be able to make sure that just because I add it in doesn't mean that it's going to actually change how the overall attack posture or the defensive posture and the threat model of my original meter. And you have to have the flexibility for that kind of mix and match componentry. Now, one of the key things to remember is that your meter firmware, however, obviously has to be upgradable, but also has to be upgradable both in a secure way and stored in a secure way. And that's a trickier question that, you know, from our perspective, we're trying to resolve that issue. We're trying to do a little forward thinking from our product line. And, you know, so I'm not going to speak to anybody else's, but it's just something that we are realizing that we need to, you know, we need to solve that problem for us.
Are you looking at any particular standards for your firmware upgrades, like understanding what the state must be of the meter as you install these things?
Yeah,
do it in a secure fashion?
Exactly. I haven't been as heavily involved in it, so I can't speak to a specific standard, and we're only just now been starting into this process. Okay, it's something that we're.
Other industries that have.
Excuse me.
Or look at other industries. Like
right.
cell phones.
So cell phones, exactly. I mean, cell phones are a real interesting problem because of the fact that customers customize these things to within an inch of their life. Okay, and how do you then upgrade the product without breaking the customizations? You know, the Droid example is a good example. I mean, you know, when you blow in the new image, you don't destroy the apps, you don't destroy the configuration. You know, IT software updates to the operating system. You know, don't blow away your configuration. Don't blow away the settings that the customer has or that the utility has. Yes. There's a question here and then a question there.
Another thing is change management. You know, as you're out there upgrading your meters, you know, is the upgrade that you're pushing out going to destroy your system? Are you going to DOS yourself with an upgrade? Which we've seen Microsoft and McAfee and several others do that.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, that's another thing that you're going to have to start looking at is, you know, the test environment where you test your changes and upgrades before they hit the field. You know, there's a lot of things around that the utilities are going to have to put in place to be able to efficiently and securely do these types of upgrades. Plus the cost. You know, if you're using a shared provider, you know, a cellular company, each one of these upgrades is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars in airtime. changes every 6 months out to these meters, because they really are gonna have an immediate effect to the bottom line when they go out.
Yeah, I think somebody was asking about standards. I mean, obviously there's like the NEMA standard, the more principal case that came out, what, about a year ago or so, on for upgrade for firmware for meters and stuff. It's principles based on NEMA, SG.
It's not real detailed, but it does get.
Yeah, it's a good start.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a place to start.
Okay. Yes.
I think we already know the answer to this question, but just to hear you say it. To what extent do you feel like that you're out ahead of the curve? You probably feel that there's all kinds of issues you haven't attended to, but to what extent do you feel you're pushing pretty hard now and making this more and more mature? How are the customers, are you pushing this at customers and saying, we're taking care of this, we're trying to take care of this for you, we thought a lot of things through? Are you getting, how much pull are you getting? Are you seeing things in RFPs that you are then happy that you can match up against what you've already done?
Don't ask me about what I've seen in RFPs, because I've seen some really screwy things in RFPs. But yeah, I've been seeing a lot around RFPs, a lot around security testing. Was it done externally? Okay, because immediately if you say, well, yeah, you've done security testing, it's all internal, you're tainted. Okay. They want to see external security testing. In some cases, I have seen RFPs asking about threat modeling. I have seen RFPs asking about our processes, our internal processes. I even had an RFP that asked if my system supported birth certificates, okay, which I had no clue as to. I had a feeling. No. I felt that was it was a question to see if only marketing folks were answering the questions, and they were just going to say yes, you know, and that automatically would discount the vendor.
It's like the green M&M test.
Yes.
Yes. So anyway, so yes, I mean I'm seeing pull from customers, okay, but mostly from the fact that they don't know what they're scared of NERC. Right now they're scared of NERC, and the bad consequences that could come about if they don't do their, not just their due diligence, but they're above their due diligence. So they're asking every possible question, and they're even drilling down and saying, in some cases, we want to see it. We want to see, what happens when you set it up and bang away at this. They want a pilot. I mean, they want to see this kind of stuff being done. This is where the attestation comes in. Because if I can show them the documentation, because once you've gone to this final security review, you roll it all up, all the documentation, you burn it to a DVD, you store it in a mayonnaise jar buried 12 feet down in concrete, saying that it's secure, that it's not going anywhere. But they want to see that kind of information, and I'm actually willing to share it with them in a room, in front of them physically, and say, here's all the documentation. If you really want to know where we are, I'm willing to do that. Okay? So it is getting pulled from the customers, and again, but it's also just showing up in general across the board in RFCs in every which way. Yes?
Can you speak on some of the success you have seen with this process that in terms of the defects that you had before?
We are starting to see like a good example, and I don't want to get into too much detail because it is somewhat internal, but we have a product that we did a threat model. In fact, I did the threat model on it, in which we found some very glaring design issues. Okay, and I've got to go back and tell my development team, by the way, bad idea. Okay, this is what we would call a bad thing. So there are, I can't just divulge them out here, but I mean we are seeing that kind of interaction with the development team, turning around and telling them, we need to reevaluate how we're doing this, because this is a mistake that could easily be attacked, could easily result in the system being compromised. We need to go back through and find a way to fix this. Okay, That's about as much as I can tell you from an internal perspective. But we are picking out things that we would have, the development teams would have said, yeah, this is fine. Nobody would ever do this. Nobody would ever think about this, X, Y, or Z. And it's like, but no, they would. All right. There are ways around this, and there are ways. They're too deep into the forest that they can, or among the trees that they can't see the whole forest. So we are getting some traction on that. Yes.
Is it? Do you have anything from an external point of view that doesn't just say, okay, this is Edo saying it? He's a perimeter security guy, and that's your job. But are you able to waive some big piece of documentation from a third party, like a NIST or a nurse, and say, here's where they think this is a legitimate thing, and therefore you have some sort of air cover with their executives, because their measurement is very different than yours, right? Their measurement is get code out on time and on budget, and you're basically poking holes in that, as is your job. So where do you resolve that tension between kind of outrageous, theoretical,
right.
Whatever, DPA?
I typically take a lot of that information from the IT environment, where saying, dealing with your vulnerabilities and your mistakes early on. I mean, there are reports from Gartner, there's reports from other, from other organizations. I think the enterprise group showing that if you can deal the cost of the vulnerability in the development cycle is small. Once you get it out there, it becomes this huge thing to deal with, both from a reputational perspective as well as from a cost perspective, because typically you may go through several cycles of product that may end up changing things that you may have to then bring back people and say, oh wow, we have this vulnerability back in this version three versions ago, and I got to get these people off their projects, focusing back on this. It's changed, but we've got to resolve it because it's still out in the field. Okay, that's a high cost. So that's typically what I pull from, is from the IT side of the world. Yes?
So you talked about firmware, and I know you've got a partnership with Cisco in the works.
Yeah.
That would seem like firmware is almost and arguably, perhaps the same as cryptography, where it's extremely hard to get it right, and you really need open standards and open libraries or organizations that know how to do this in order to make sure that it's being done in correct ways.
I think we have enough experience internally, and I think Cisco has enough experience internally that they have a good process. Now, interestingly enough, I mean, Cisco has its own security development lifecycle. I don't honestly know what the process is. I was supposed to find out last week, but we ran out of time in our meetings. It's on my agenda to find out exactly what are they doing, what's their process, because to my perspective, I'm relying on their equipment to carry my traffic. All right. I know my stuff. I know where I'm going. I just don't know what the details are of theirs. But I believe, knowing the reputation of Cisco to an extent, and having been inside and knowing some of the folks that are doing their own internal security testing. I mean, I know some of the folks on the stat team that does a lot of their internal security testing. These guys know their stuff backwards and forwards. I mean, some of the guys have left. Matt Franz left Cisco, and I think Venkat is still there. Ed Carter's still there. These guys have been doing this kind of stuff for years, and they are. I would rank them as some of the top-notch folks in the industry. They really do know their stuff, and they also know the Cisco environment extremely well. And Cisco, even back when I was there, they were very serious about this. They understood that this was a requirement, and we have made it clear to them that we also see it as a prime requirement for any solution that we come up with in a joint venture.
Okay. I think we've got time for just a couple more questions and stuff, and then we're going to break for lunch, and I'll give a little bit of logistics around that. But I did want to ask you one of the questions here too that I kind of jotted down that related to insider threat. On that, and I kind of want to you're doing, basically to limit the threat surface on the inside, because, inside, you know, it's just kind of soft, gooey, mushy.
Yeah, it's like the Eskimo pie, you know. I keep remembering that Gary Larson, you know, where you have the two polar bears reaching inside of an igloo, you know, and they're saying, you know, ooh, crunchy on the outside, soft and gooey on the inside. You know, from the insider threat perspective, so I think this is somewhat of my own bias on this. You have two issues here. One is policy and one is technology. Technology can only go so far. I mean, I can put, you know, role-based access control. I can try to, you know, make recommendations on how to install the software. You can't control it on the utility side. The utility will do whatever they want. Okay, I can give them the tools to lock it down as far as it goes. I can provide them when they install the software, it's locked down as far as it goes. But if they open it up, it's a different story. From an insider threat, we try to provide the ability to detect. All right, so a good example, you can't send out, this is just one example, you can't send out 1,000 disconnects or 2,000 disconnects or however many that you want without a secondary authorization from that perspective. It has to be vetted by somebody else. So I can't have some malicious guy who's saying, you know what, I know I'm on the chopping block, I'm going to really stick it to him, and I'm sending out, you know, 10, you know, this many disconnects, because it's going to get stopped by the system and say, whoa, 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 you know, this is, now, he does it, if he's smart, you know, and he knows what the limit is, you know, he knows what his, because it's definable by the utility, he can do it below that limit, or try to.
So would that same person within the system have the capability to define the limit and issue?
No, they shouldn't. No, they would be an administrator who defines the limit. They would be more of an operator. They would not have that limit. That's where we get into the role-based access control.
And I guess tied to that is did you supply the utilities or the users that guidance on here's what we recommend as policies and
in the past, we haven't, and we are working on that, getting that documentation out there, and it is a high priority on my list of things to do.
so I see that
That is,
other folks just across the board are looking for.
we actually have a security guide, and it needs to be updated, and I have been pushing to actually get it expanded so that we include recommendations. But then also it comes down to the SD3 that we were talking about, secure by design, by default, and by deployment, is those should be set low, okay, you know, appropriately. Those settings should be set appropriately from the beginning and allow the customer to then decide from their perspective and their business risk analysis, do I need to change these? Yes?
You know, you brought up a really interesting point where you say the same person shouldn't be able to define road criteria. Shouldn't is actually operative word there. But
yes.
As we know, in many cases, you have utilities where there's one IT guy, he's also the security guy, and you know he's also the guy that washes the windows. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you have to really be concerned with. Is you know, in some cases, you really can't always separate the duties like you probably should.
That's true, and that's absolutely true. And then, you know, again, I can cover the majority of cases. I don't think you'll ever get 100% coverage. You know, because of the fact that there's just too many variables in here. And if the utility's got only one guy to handle everything, he's the guy who does the disconnects, he's the guy who sets the limits. He may just turn off the whole system.
Yeah,
Keep him,
he's got God power, so.
Exactly.
Well paid.
Yeah, make sure he's well paid.
Thanks,
You're welcome.